letter O is to approve the advertisement for bids for the addition and renovation project to Northern Middle School. I know I had encouraged the board to put this on, as you know, as our conversation was from last week's construction meeting, just so we have the ability to talk about it tonight. So that's why it's on, and it's time to talk.
What's the cost of putting it out to bid? And is this a flashpoint for Dewey and Schrader? Will they be compensated now that it goes out to bid? Will they receive additional compensation?
There is a bid portion to Schrader's contract. I do not believe there is to Dewey's contract. But I need to pull up Schrader's contract. If I remember correctly, I think the Schrader amount was about $50,000, but I have to look at their contract to verify that. And so I'll try to pull that up here.
If I remember correctly, I think it was, I want to say over 100, 150, something like that. Because I know we talked about this a couple of meetings ago.
We did. I'll find it here.
And what about just the regular bid process without the compensation to Dewey or Schrader? What is the cost?
There's an advertising cost that we have to advertise the bids. That's pretty much it. There's not really any additional costs other than the advertisements.
Well, I think we're at the point where, you know, we're making a decision that's good for the next 50 years. And I was there when they made a decision in 1969 to build that building in a wetland. And we joked about that as students because we thought we were going to get a swimming pool and they could just fill it because of where it was going to be built. You know, the school was built in the wetlands and the parking lot was up on the hill. So it was a wrong design then, and it's a wrong design now. So I have concerns about that, lightly. A little frustrated that all along we've asked questions, we get numbers that continually vary. The numbers that were given to us, we've asked repeatedly for cost per square foot from other projects. We never got any. And in the last meeting, we got one from State College, Reading, Bellefonte, and a 2020 project from Eastern York. And, you know, those numbers are meaningless. The numbers that were given to us by Randy Davis and John Medea have been deemed meaningless, which are less than $300 a square foot. Needless to say, with that and the project where it is, now we're looking at $10 million off of the SLC project. We're talking about $9 million for a district administration office. I've lost all confidence and faith in this design team. I think we need a new design team.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with what Jerry's saying. I mean, I think the real question is, do we want to continue with the renovation as stated? And if the answer is no, I don't see any indication that we're going to have the support from the current design team to look at any other option than continue down the road of the current plan. So I feel where we're at. If we're all on board with the renovation, then we do that. But if we're not, I don't see it going forward with the current team.
Yeah, we're still at $70 million or 69, maybe the 69 last meeting was 71 the month before for one classroom. So none of my constituents want us to spend that kind of money on renovating a building, and we're making a 50-year decision. So I'm not in favor of moving forward with that.
So a concern I had out of the last update, which included the financial piece, was, I think Mr. Swilly referenced it, with it appears that the totals for all the work that needs to be done. We need to, it was phrased as cut $10 million from the SLC. The SLC right now sets as a $25 million project, so you're looking at cutting 40% of that project. And I wonder if we're looking at this in context of whatever piece of the total barring puzzle, whether it's option 1 or 2 or 3 that have been presented, it, I believe, was option 1, I think, was 105. And I don't recall the others off the top of my head. I think it was 25 million more to the next one. But I just wonder if it would be better suited to look at trying to evaluate each of those from the perspective of trying to take $10 million from the total rather than just the one small piece. And that was just something after the last middle school discussion, as I was digging into the numbers more, questioned.
When I asked Dave Schrader, what is the tipping point from new to renovate, he said 90-10. And then we received numbers that from Jason that were 80, it meets the 80-20 industry standard. So I reached out to 2 other architects, not Crabtree, and it was like 75-73. But we're approaching that now. Okay, we're approaching that number now at 73 or 75%. And we went from $400 a square foot, and they regressed back to 320, 340, whatever you want to say. But it's still, they were adamant it was 400. Why'd they change their mind? Again, I have no trust. I just, I'm like a 50-year decision.
I'm sorry.
I'll hold on, Jason. I'm done. When I'm done, you can talk. I have no trust that the numbers keep changing every month. 168,000 square foot renovation. Next month it's 183, and then it's all over the place all the time. So I have no trust.
We have answered all of those questions, and the fact that this one classroom continued to be brought up, it has been debunked many times. Mr. Halaki talked about it at the last meeting. I'm sorry, Mr. Schwirly, but you're just not listening to the answers we're giving you because I don't know why, but you're not listening. And you're either unable to keep up with what we're saying or you don't want to hear what we're saying. But we have answered all of your questions and you keep repeating the same talking points month after month. And from the administration standpoint, that is extremely frustrating because we feel like we're answering every one of these 9 board members' questions, including yours, who I think has asked the most questions. So I just have to say, it's extremely frustrating to hear you say that because we have worked very hard to answer your questions.
I've worked hard, but I would say the same thing, Jason. I've asked for numbers, and I couldn't get those numbers from local central Pennsylvania projects, and I asked for those. So you didn't answer the questions. You didn't what I wanted. You didn't provide what I asked for. So I'm not making a 50-year decision and looking back and saying we made a mistake and renovated a building that sits in a wetlands. And I also want to know what are they going to do with the retention pond issue for that building? Where's the water going?
There's different water retentions, and some of it's put into the Northern Elementary School project. It's all in the site plans.
They're going to go underground with a lot of that runoff. And I asked 2 months ago, would we retain the large grassy area to the entrance of Northern Elementary? And I was assured we would. Now I go back there and there's a detention pond there. So we've lost that grassy area, which is parking for baseball, cross-country course, back to school night, track and field days out in spring. We're going to put a wetlands. We created a wetlands right by the entrance of an elementary school. Probably have a fence around it. So why would you create a wetlands next to an elementary school? And that's part of the problem. And that, that just came through my development, spray for West Nile virus. So we're going to put a wetlands right next to an elementary school to access the kids. And the other part of their water management program. It's underground water, storage basins at the middle school. Well, already under that middle school is a wetlands. There's already water there. Go over and look at the lobby, the polar bear lobby in the winter, and you see it raises up because there's underground springs there and it freezes. So I think they're going to have a heck of a time putting more underground storage for water in that place there. So I don't see how you can put more water on top of more water that's already there. So that's another concern I have with that project.
Jerry, if that were the case, what would be your recommendation if we did not proceed? You want a different architect is what you're asking for? And then what would you be looking at, time-wise?
I don't think we're in a hurry. I think, we talked about our debt capacity. I don't think we need to do this right away. I mean, we're very close to our debt capacity with this project. So I think we need to look and see.
As a parent of a middle schooler, it needs to happen. I'm sorry, but the stories my daughter can come in here and tell you that have happened to her and her teachers, it needs to happen. So I don't want to hear that.
Nope.
I'd like to hear those stories, because everybody brings that up, and then every time I ask
I'll have her
the
come in. I'll have her come in and I'll have her tell you how the water came down through
That's
the
right.
wall and messed up all of the teacher's personal items from her mother who had passed away. And projects that students worked so hard on, ruined.
We had a roof that was replaced. and
That was
we had
after the
the-
roof
and
was
we had the HVAC
replaced.
system that the director of maintenance failed to have serviced, and the pipe broke.
We were told at the last meeting that that building is warm, safe, and dry. The administration told us that last week.
I really hope that that's true.
That's what the administration told us last week. That building's warm, safe, and dry.
I mean, I'm sure at this point we've had structural engineers look at it. They could give us a report, tell us if it's warm, safe, and dry. We don't have to take our own word for it.
They say the bones of that building are good, but what are the bones? What does that mean when they say the bones of the building are good? John, you're in that business. Do you know what that reference is, Greg? Do you know what that reference is?
I think that references that they feel like there's more life in the building and you can renovate it. And if the bones weren't good, they would say, don't renovate the building. Okay. I think the board has a decision to make, and there's really three choices. I mean, you can put the job out for bid the way it is now, knowing that it's a $70 million budget. You can ask the design team to lower the cost of the renovation. You can absolutely, like Steve had suggested, he said, I thought we had an opportunity to tell them, what our budget was or what our cost was, and maybe that wasn't conveyed to them well. But we can certainly do that and say, we would like you to reduce the cost so that we don't have to lower the cost of a sports and learning future construction project. We can absolutely do that. Or you can pick a new design team, but doing nothing and just saying we're not going to put the job out for bid is not one of them. So
I feel like I've asked the question about reducing the cost of the renovation, and I just keep getting the answer that it is what it is. There's nothing really to cut out there, which I find extremely hard to believe.
what David told us on Thursday night, David Schrader said, you need a new cafeteria, but you certainly don't need the large commons areas. He said there are other things like some of the infill, which is expensive, and Dewey has said that, eliminating that. Nobody's given that direction to the design team. And I would just say before the board chooses to remove the design team that the administration wanted and the previous board voted for, I would like to give that design team the opportunity to do what this board wants. And if this board just doesn't want a renovation and they want absolutely new construction, you can roll the dice and try to pick a new team, but you can't guarantee the outcome. So that's the risk with that. But just saying we're not going to vote on it or tabling it indefinitely is just a poor decision. Like we need some direction.
I would say that, we went through our decision process, and part of that has been a process of elimination. Early on in one of the earlier work sessions, we talked about the middle school renovation and addition projects, such as we're proposing now to go to bid on. then we talked about something less than that, and then we talked about something more than that. The something less was the first thing that that the board collectively eliminated as an option. So we then focused on this renovation, and something more would be something new, right? So we've continued to look at new as well, and that's become obviously more than anything else an affordability factor. I just want to, on the record, and I speak for myself, and I think I speak for the entire administration, we would love a new building. We would love a new building. Obviously, that's your best case scenario, is if you can have a new building. It would solve some problems. We wouldn't have to worry about modulars, phasing. It would be easier on our students and teachers because of the lack of need for phasing and so forth. There are benefits to that, but then it becomes a question of not do what we want, but what can we do? And I think we've tried to share or show that we can afford it based on the debt service that we can tolerate on our general fund budget annually, and then the debt, the debt capacity, which is, that's a math equation, and we come up short when we go to something above what we're suggesting here and asking for advertisement for bids on.
Jason, what's the break-even point between renovation and new build? Like at what point, 80%, 75? I know Mr. Swilly threw out a couple different numbers, but what would your break-even number be?
Typically what's used is 80-20. That's what you hear most of the time, is 80-20. But that's in isolation. That's when you're looking at a renovated building or a new building without looking at it. I know, Zach, you were here on Thursday, so I talked a little bit about this last week. But that's not looking at it holistically. We've got an SLC building that we have to deal with. Potentially, if you're going to build new, we have the old middle school that we have to deal with. So, if you're looking at it in isolation, new build versus renovation, just that, you're looking at 80-20. But we have more than, I shouldn't say bigger, we have more than just that we have to look at. And even when I look at that, as I put in the summary email that I sent to the board on Friday, when we look at it holistically, we're still over that 80-20 when you're including everything with option 1, and there's nothing in options 2 or 3 that meet any of those financial criteria. And I'm not talking by $1 million, right? I'm talking about tens of a percent, tens of millions of dollars. These aren't close differences; these are significant differences. And I just have to add that this design, whether it needs reduced or not, we're open to hearing that. But the design as is currently completed, and I know we've said this, but I just feel like it needs stated again, went through an 18-month process with steering committee members. Students were engaged, families were engaged, teachers were engaged, community members were engaged, the board was engaged, the administration was engaged, and it was focused on students, because that's what we do here. I absolutely understand that we have to be very concerned about budgets. I live that every day. But we're here for our students and our families. And I think we really need to make sure we're focusing on that during these discussions as well, because this plan came from that. It came from that as our base. So I just feel like that has to be said here. It hasn't been said in 6 months, in my opinion.
Have we had a walkthrough of the middle school?
I did one. Jerry did one.
Based on the auditorium then? And you're fine with the holes that are in auditorium?
I'm not saying that things don't need to be replaced.
It's
I don't think
a
anybody's-
jail, it's
I don't
a
think
jail that my
anybody's
kids are
saying
going to
that.
school in and they have to learn in that environment, and I'm sorry, that's ridiculous. My kids deserve better, and that's why I'm on the board, to make sure that they get better. This is ridiculous.
In my opinion, Alyssa, kids care about teachers, what they're learning, the environment they're in. I've never had one day of my kid's life that went through that middle school, they came in and said that they feel like they're going to school in a dungeon.
I'm
unless
really
somebody-
happy that your
unless an
kids didn't
adult-
feel that way because my kids did. So I'm sorry. Like, and I want to ask the teachers that have to work there. Like, I do whatever you
I
want.
just- I
I
just
want to
don't
go
wanna-
through with it. That's what I say. I'm done with the conversation.
I
You
just
guys
don't want everybody.
go do your thing.
I don't want everybody to think that every problem that we have in the middle school is going to be solved by a brand new middle school. I think through all this discussion, we're focusing so much on the building and not enough on everything else that goes into having a good school.
I can understand that if you were here sitting through all the meetings that I sat through.
Unfortunately, I wasn't, and I can tell you if I was, we wouldn't have gotten to this point.
Great.
We would have talked more about it when it got over 50 million that was originally talked about at the
Okay,
beginning.
so that's what we're here now. What do you want to do? Let's go for it. The majority of the board gets to decide, so let's go. I'm done with this conversation. Like, how many meetings are we going to have that we talk about this over and over and over again? Let's make a decision and roll with it. I'm over this.
And I think we're, like Greg had mentioned, we can't, doing nothing like you're at that point of okay, and, you know, wherever you land is fine, but, you know, eventually it just comes down to, okay, we've tasked the design team, we've asked them to do this, we've asked them to do that, and here's that point of whether you agree with it or not, that's fine, but, you know, as Greg had said, you have to make a decision of what we're going to do to Alyssa's point, so, and, you know, to everyone's around, so.
I don't want to put the job out for bid knowing that the board is not going to approve bids, right? It's got a $70 million budget. It's going to cost contractors hundreds of millions of dollars to put bids together, to devote the manpower, to preparing all that stuff, to getting bonding. Like, there's a lot of cost involved with that. So, if the board wants to see if this design team can lower the cost of a renovation, you're better off doing that now than putting it out for bid and saying we're rejecting the bids because we want to lower the price, right? So if a renovation with this team is something that the board's willing to consider, I would say this is the time now to say let's go down that road. But there has to be a reason for that, right? There has to be a goal, a number. If you want to reduce that $10 million that we have to cut out of SLC or get it as close as possible, that seems like a reasonable goal. When you get to $50 million, you're probably not going to get there. But we've got to give clear direction, right? And right now we're just talking about different things. And I just, I would hope that the board can come up with some clear direction tonight.
What's been the initial reason that we're doing the renovation addition to the school? What was the initial reason? It was because of the increase in population around the district, so we were allowing for growth. Is that correct?
Right. Enrollment was part of the timing, trying to hit when peak enrollment was primarily because the building is falling apart and the building needs work.
Okay. My whole issue all along has been the amount of money that's required to do this. And flipping the building was probably half the cost of doing that. Of half the cost of the building was probably just in flipping the thing.
We actually specifically asked them that, and that was not the majority of the cost according to.
I can't imagine that.
That's what they reported.
It would be that much. But that would be that little there. It's just that, it's more than just what we have now. It's more than just what is the school, the cost of the school is, but it's what we have coming too. So we're told that we're going to have a 2% tax increase every year, and that's indefinite. But we have another school contract coming up in a year or so, in a year and a half, and teacher contract rather. And they're not going to ask for the same amount of money. I mean, that's going to be budgeted in too. So just to keep on getting us so close to our debt limit, it just does not make any sense.
Would you support a renovation at a lower cost?
Yeah, but not flipping the building.
Flipping the building doesn't cost anymore.
I
I'm just saying
can't
that's.
look, if the HVAC's been updated and there's a new roof on it there, you're going to have a lot of interior work. So we did, we talked about, option 3A or whatever, we just kind of said jokingly, but they did give us another option, which we rejected as part of the total thing, and that was to add that 2-story section for 10 classrooms on there. I mean, that will give you your classrooms that you need on there, but now you still have the cafeteria and you still have the other interior work that would need to be done. But they estimated that cost to be $6 to $7 million to do that. That was just a ballpark, admittedly, in order to do that. So you do have that option there, and but the other things that would go along with that, that's the unknown. I mean, to me, it would be the unknown. Again, just with you have extra students, you're gonna have to have the cafeteria space, for those students as well. And if they need,
we need a new cafeteria, and a new kitchen, absolutely. Yeah.
We have a saying in our business when it comes to talking about the building on there. That we say that this is the piano crate, not the piano. We make sure that we have a good product going out the door, and not as concerned about the building. Well, the schools are in the education business, and their product going out the door should be a quality educated student, and spending this kind of money for a building is not going to guarantee that. So the students, when they leave, they're not going to remember how fancy the building was or how minimal the building is. What they're going to remember is what's being taken, what they learned and what they can take with them, as adults. And so that's where I think if we want to invest money, we invest in people, not in buildings.
So, some of the reasons I talked about the middle school construction meeting that I was recently asking about the new construction were due to the closing the gap between the two options. And then, as we also kind of alluded to a couple times, is the question of the total debt capacity. And effectively for all of the things that we need being $10 million over budget or over what our capacity is. And as I think through it, is one of my main reasons was because, I'm always looking for data points, and as the data point of the existing construction dollars got closer to the new construction dollars, that's what made me think, hey, we should seriously be considering, what the correct decision is. So that was based off of a delta, and so we have a dollar concern with the total of all of our required needs. And also this, is it possible that I do believe we do have a team of professionals that's with us. It's been said before that utilizing them, we are, the difference at the middle school meeting was mentioned that at the start of working with the design team, it was a $29 million difference between existing and new, and it's now $25 million, $26 million. So it's really been the same throughout. So it seems we are looking with that team at a renovation. But they also said that when we were talking about, they had been asked to respond to some questions about new building construction, they did come with a handful of pages of items that I think they said were not, that were aesthetic options, I guess I would say. Is it possible that they could look to it, again, maintaining our, I may not use the right terms, but our educational modeling or programming is important. We need to meet the needs of our students. We need to meet of what our staff is saying they need to do with our spaces. But I think even our team recognized that there is some range available there, and does investigating the cost of a renovation tactically assist with some of these goals that we're trying to do. We're trying to get a total bag of goods done for a little bit lower cost. And if the middle school is part of that tactically, it also widens the delta between renovation and new, thereby, pointing to the benefits of a renovation.
I don't know if I can just maybe answer a piece of that. Well stated, good point. The middle school project as is was supposed to have two deducts, one being the instructional stairs, one being, and I know we talked about this, I just want to bring it back up based on what you just said, one being the window changes, more daylight, which is, like, that was number one on pretty much everyone's list, but we don't have to do that. But I think to your point, are there things, whether it's those two deducts or maybe some other items that can help get that number down? And also, I know if Jamie were here with Dewey, he would say bidding that project this fall could be an easy way, potentially, if we get beneficial bids in a fall for next summer. A really easy way for us to get a lower cost building. We didn't even have to do anything, we just bid it at the right time. Some of that's procurement, phasing, I won't get into all that stuff, but we won't know I won't know the answer to that piece unless we actually bid it. So I hear what Greg's saying, like we don't just want to bid it just to bid it. But I think there's different pieces to that have already been kind of built in, if you will, to this middle school plan. Now, if the question is, hey, can you look for more? I think that's, again, maybe back to Greg's point, do we get the design team back together here for the next month and be like, okay, what other pieces can either be deducts to the bid or just completely changed? We've had some of those conversations with Dewey. They have told me that for the most part, through their process of value engineering, it is what it is for the most part. But I don't think that would be out of the realm of possibility for us to go back and even look for more potential, alternate deducts, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, I think I would like, you mentioned Dewey, it would be helpful to hear from Schrader from that design perspective of what they're putting in the building. And David Schrader did allude to this some, that there's, I would call tactical decisions. And we do have a couple of deducts there. And the things I would be thinking about is, I think some of it, like in terms of my understanding was that the window deduct was, the window-based bid was to expand the windows in the classroom. And the window deduct would be to keep them the same. And what I would ask to look for is things that might be a little bit more easily controllable are, for example, the cafeteria addition or commons, whatever we're referring to it with. Is there anything in that, as in, like for our students where they're spending, the majority of their days, is natural lighting is important. So I don't want to just say, oh, hey, yeah, we can take these two deducts, no problem. I think I just think from this world of things that there could be benefit on multiple levels, particularly even when I do wonder about, regardless of where the bids come in and what they come in at, and then we are down the path, and then we move to the SLC, and then it's a real tough thing to wring out dollars from something much smaller, when as those renovation and new construction dollars kind of starting to come closer together, there's potentially an opportunity there. I think if they look at it from a...
Yeah, Dave Schrader even said, you need a new cafeteria, but there's a difference between building a new cafeteria and building a 2-story glass commons, which is what we currently have in our design. So there's a big difference between one end and the other. And so, I mean, I would support asking this team that we have to save money on our renovation if the board wants to do that. But if there's not a majority of the board that wants to go down that road, then like this is the time to say we're going to roll the dice and hope that another team gets us what we want. But that's going to be another 18 months down the road, and there's still a risk that we still don't get what we want. So I'm just, I can't predict where that outcome is. I don't know.
Jason, if we, to John's point, said we want to look for more deductions, does that have to come before we put it out to bid, or could it come after?
Some could come after. It would be a lot cleaner, and you'd probably get more bang for your buck if you do it beforehand, because credits are never, I hate to say it, full credits.
Exactly. Right. Yeah.
But, so yeah, the more you can do ahead of time, planned. Now, I'm not talking auditing deducts necessarily. You're still not getting the exact bang for your buck with those, but it's better than after the fact saying, hey, now that you've already bid this, we want you to remove that or change this. The more we can do up front, the better it would be.
So if we said, hey team, come back with, here's our number, whatever that looks like, and that's then next month, and you put it out to bid, can you still hit that fall time frame that you would want to?
If we got advertisement approvals next month in September, yes, I would say we could do that.
I would say, to put it in perspective, it was February when we were looking to, right, February?
Originally.
When we did the
Elementary,
correct.
and the middle school was up for discussion. So anything months ahead of that would be well ahead of that schedule.
Right. The sooner the better. I mean, there's no drop dead date. You can do it whenever, but in order to try to achieve what we would be achieving with a fall bid, the sooner the better too, right? So it's not only September, it can be October, November. I mean, it is what it is, but the sooner the better.
Just so I understand the working relationship with Schrader a little better, prior to this year, was there any discussion or direction from the board to Schrader to try to reduce costs on this project?
No. I specifically asked in November when we had the Act 34 hearing. So we don't have enough money for this project. And at the time, the board said, that's fine, we'll change our budget so it reflects the updated or the design development progress of the project. So as costs have escalated, the board has always been okay with the escalating costs.
I mean, I could support having them take a crack at it. I feel that there might be some things that could be done that don't, it's not always an aesthetic issue either. I mean, I know we talked about the construction of walls. I think it was either you or David mentioned about not having the drawings on the building, not knowing about the load-bearing walls. I mean, I don't know that I agree with that. I mean, I work on the buildings all the time. You figure out if it's a load-bearing wall or not. So I just want to make sure we're not making decisions like that that's overcompensating for something that we could figure out if we just took a little bit more time to analyze. I guess, in my experience on a smaller scale with dealing with architects, I mean, I'm working on a project right now that I ended up firing the architect, replacing them, and I cut the cost by 50%. I mean, there are architects that will work with you to try to get the best bang for your buck, and there are other ones that want to build an awesome Ferrari that nobody can afford to drive, you know. So, you know, an unfortunate factor here is we don't, you know, my case is you have to build a building that makes money. Here, that's not quite the constraint. It's, you know, we have budgets, but it's not that we have to turn a profit with this building. But I think we need to look at it as though, you know, if we're doing this in the private sector, would we still do it, or would we rethink things and try to make a little bit more intelligent decisions to try to drive the costs down and still get what we want? So I'm all for having Schrader tried. If you're telling me we haven't had this conversation previously, I think we owe it to them to have this conversation and see what they're capable of coming back with.
But I just want to be careful that we can't keep having this conversation next February, next March, next April. Like, we're going to know within the first 30 to probably the first 30 days, like, how much potential and what does it look like. So, I mean, there's still a decision the board's going to have to make, and that is, do you want to keep going down that road? Or in Jerry's case, do you want to pick a different road? So,
I guess my comment to that, you made the comment last week, which I agree with you. You know, you guys are on the board through this whole deal, and it sucks for us coming in here not knowing the whole thing. I guess on the flip side of that, it sucks for the guys that are on the board that kind of, some of these questions have already been answered. You know, 50% of the board here is new, and it's I don't know that it's smart to vote on something without having all the details and without knowing. I feel confident that this current board, once we make a decision, is going to be the best decision for the taxpayers going forward. I guess I would caution everybody to rush a decision. Like Jerry said, we're talking about a 50-year decision here. I want to make a decision to renovate or build a new school as quickly as the next guy, but I don't want to rush to vote on something next week and 2 years later say, oh shoot, you know, I wish we would have thought about that. You know, I think it's worth taking whatever time it takes to make sure that once we're done and make a decision, it is the right decision going forward, as painful as it may be in the short term here.
I think to your point, if you look at the Northern Elementary School, we all came to a consensus, and it was unanimous. So agreed that we want to get to that same point in middle school. So, I mean, I'm willing to let them take a crack at it to see if they can, but it comes to a point where, you know, Mr. Hazen teaches his classroom. I am not a teacher. It would be foolish of me to tell him otherwise how to teach his classroom if that's not my expertise. So eventually it comes to a point where we have to trust that they have our best interest at heart and they've done their due diligence. Not that we can't ask questions, and not that you can't even disagree if you genuinely feel that way. But it comes to a point where it's okay, they're the expert. I've never built a building in my life, so I'm just going to have to trust that they have our best interest at heart. So, but
Greg, how much did you say it would cost for them to put it out for bid and then come back with a?
So I just looked in our contract. It's 5% of their fee, and their fee, Jason, is 5%. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yes.
5% of 5, so 0.25% to put it out for bid on a $70 million project. So $140,000. Is that right? $140,000. So that's assuming that we would accept bids and then move forward, because that involves their submittal review and some other stuff in the procurement phase. But it's 5% of their fee.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say what I had to say about it. I think our kids went through this with Greg before. And we had one girl, two boys, and maybe that plays into it because boys don't, complain about things that, and I don't mean to sound sexist, but boys just don't care about certain things. If there's strictness and if there's weed, they just, they're on to the next thing. So we didn't really have a problem with it from a building standpoint, and that's about 6-7 years ago for some of them, 8-9 years ago for some of them. So it wasn't the same time zone as Alyssa's kids. So I haven't been in the building nearly as much as she has probably, and her kids have been there quite a bit. So that is to be taken into consideration. I do think that from the feedback I've got from a teacher or two within the building, that there were major problems, and that they were significant, wet, and just people following, and different things not working correctly. 3 outlets in a room instead of, maybe 5 or 6 or 7 or whatever they need. And so I think some of those things, if I understand it correctly, again, I haven't had a big walkthrough, but most of them are working and at least reasonably accommodating right now. That's my understanding. So if the building is fairly workable at the time, not totally unsafe, and its capacity, it's not at capacity, the lunchroom maybe, but I don't know that any other the rooms or the services that they render there are over capacity. I kind of think what Jerry had to say about the cleanliness of it could come into play. That is that there's not a big rush, but that doesn't mean we just hang around and let people continue to charge us architects or building advisors charge us ad infinitum. I think we make a decision at some point. I would be interested in hearing what they have to say. If they can, if Schrader can reduce the cost of the building and the design, I think that would be interesting. I think it was providential or possibly providential when the people from the neighborhood, people from the township, school district came in and cited a few things that they thought, and it caused us to consider. That's not necessarily bad. That's natural in a collaborative school district where we listen to what the customers have to say, which is the people that have to pay the taxes. So that would seem to me to be a good thing. Does it delay things a little bit? Yeah, it does. But counterpoint sometimes is good in a free society. So I'm okay with taking a look at it. I do think the lack of coming to the table that we might have seen from the architects when we've asked, and maybe we haven't asked them, right, to your point, what I've said before, maybe we haven't asked them to really come to the table and really say, what can you do about the cost of this? We got what we wanted over at the Northern Elementary, but we're not getting, we haven't gotten what we wanted so far, at least for some of us in the middle school. So that's not necessarily the time to go ahead with it at any cost. It is the time to ask them to come to the table and see if they can do something about it. And the enterprise, they can say yes, they can say no. So if the answer is no on their part, then I think it might be what Paul would refer to as if they don't want to build it, then they tell us by referencing the cost that they say that they have to have. But I do think there's a place to give them, because maybe we haven't asked for a question, maybe we haven't been direct enough. And if that's the case, give them a chance to come to the table, and if they're not, and if they have no dog in their fight, then maybe it's time to move on. So that's why, I like them, they're professional, they're good, been very kind, they've come back and back and back. But there is a time to say yes, there's a time to say no. So I'm okay to say either, but I think we give them a chance to say what they have to say about it.
When you live this world, is there a number like you would look forward to say, hey, if you could deduct X on savings?
I don't know the exact number. I think talked about it a little bit earlier, as in the data points of, as those numbers come together, it's a trigger that, hey, okay, one of these could potentially be out of balance. And so what I would say is I think the task could be reasonable for them in that between the combination, there is benefit here in that there is Dewey and Schrader. Okay, so Schrader's the design team, Dewey is the ones who's seeing what the design team puts together and then putting dollars to that. So between the two of them, they can get to looking at where are the dollars in the project. So there's questions earlier about, is it flipping the building? Is it the infills? What is it? Well, they're going to know what it is. So as an example, when the elementary was bid, the one thing that Dewey came back with and said, hey, the one thing we were off a little bit on the budget was the electrical. And there was a laundry list of items that they came back with, and I think they're even working through some, deduct credits after the fact. So I think it's the position of, if they see that, hey, there's a lot of dollars in electrical, let's say, we'll look at that to see what reasonably could be taken out of it. So I think that's the way I would look to approach it. And I think if they look at it from that perspective, it's reasonable. And I base that off of what I believe it was David Schrader really said was, there is a range, that you can design in, and we were sitting at this point, and what does it look like are they able to work within that range and track dollars and see, where reasonably the dollars are, and if there's where they can save from that.
Jerry, you said about not having any local bids, for bids from local schools there. Well, we do the CTC. They were doing the same thing, and now they allowed for $23.5 million on there, and now, but it came like $4 million higher than what they will allow for, which means it's still, they'd have to work through that, figure out what they're doing. But my point is that those additions and renovations are designed to accommodate 278 more students on there, and we're doing a similar amount for twice the amount of money on there, and there's a reason for that. There's a reason that theirs is so much different, and that's what we have to figure out.
It goes back to my earlier point about architects saving or costing you money. And in their defense, maybe they were told not to focus a ton of time on the new construction, but I'm very concerned that we've preached $400 a square plus until a competitor came in and said you can do it a lot less, and now we're talking about mid-threes. There again, my opinion is if we had an architect that has cost in mind and was tasked to say what can we build a middle school for, we can't afford it for, that number should have came from them and not a competitor, and they were forced to back into that number for fear of us no one. But I'm all in favor of having them look at cost, but I think we need to go into this with our eyes wide open. I'm not 100% sure they're capable of giving us a product at the most reasonable price possible. I don't know that they think that way.
Well, I would like to give them an opportunity, and is that enough for you, Steve, to run with as far as, ideally, Mr. Young said we need to save $10 million on the rest of the district construction, so we could save as much of that as possible, and we don't have to make as many concessions, elsewhere, as we're doing the rest of the construction. So I just did quick math, $50 a square foot is a little over $8 million. So that would take your renovation from $325 a square foot to $275. So good Lord, if they could do that, that seems like that would that would meet the needs of a lot of people in this room as far as reducing the cost, helping us with some other stuff. So what's the right number? How much can they save? I don't know, but it's got to be significant, so.
Well, I did want to get a clarification from John. John, when you talked about tactically looking at level design, deducts and so forth, were you speaking for the renovation or for a new?
I was just talking to the renovation because it sounded like we were talking specifically about the renovation.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure we were all on the same, well, not all on the same page, but you were on the same page with what Greg is proposing there.
I mean, there's some big picture things, like they're moving the mechanical room, and if you didn't have to do chilled water throughout the building, right, then you don't have to move the mechanical room. Our HVAC number, I was just looking at it from Act 34, is like $58 a square foot. That's a big number. So, I mean, that might be one area that they could save just by looking at other system types. And Dave Schrader had even mentioned that last week, at the meeting that we had. So, I would say just don't be limited to looking at the walls or the glass or the windows, but, look at the entire project, because I think they already know maybe there's some areas where they could save us some money.
Yeah, I would always, to your question, I think if that's our option, I think we try to do that. But I would want to measure that then, when we come out of that, against what we wanted, as a program. And what kind of impact anything that we do from this point out has an impact, to what extent it has an impact on our program. So that's an important factor.
So does the board agree that we don't want to impact the programming that we spent a year doing with Schrader and the administration? Like, they came up with educational programming in a certain number of classrooms and support rooms and stuff, so we certainly want to maintain that to the best of the ability. Is that?
And the input that Jason referenced too. I mean, that was born of input from the community.
Yeah.
As far as what they're looking for in the middle school.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we have to meet our educational goals, which is based off of our programming. And it comes down to, can there be enough value in the renovation to make it a very straightforward decision? Because we do fight a cost issue, which we're even fighting right now with the renovation. So if we can, but we need to meet our educational goals and our programs. And so if the finances is broken and we can't meet our educational goals, we need to rebalance something that happens there. So that's got to be part of the equation, whether it's, comparing existing to new. We're talking now about the existing. Can that number be changed to make it a more straightforward decision?
Would somebody be able to give me an example of an educational goal that's not being met, that will be met with this renovation? So I just understand kind of what I'm referring to here.
It probably should, I'm going to guess program, not goal. I was probably using the wrong word, because I'm sure we have the same education.
Even program, like I struggle with understanding.
Well, if we eliminate tech ed spaces, right, then we're causing a disruption to the program that we all believe we need, right? So that's not a reasonable thing to say. We're going to save $10 million by not doing this infill for tech ed. Like, we might have to do it a different way. Is that reasonable? I'm looking at you, Mr. Relu, you're looking at me. Like, but I mean, that's what we're talking about, is not eliminating programs, the program that we've done.
Is your question, what do we, of the current design, what educationally are we gaining with this current design? Is that what you were asking? Or
Not overall, just like an example of, if we're talking about affecting the educational needs with scaling back monetarily on the renovation. What would be an example, which I think you may have answered the question. Like if we would say we're not going to infill the common area, whatever you call it, to save money, that would be an example of affecting the education.
and I would think Troy and Dr. Meekin would be able to probably answer that question.
Yeah, that's a good, I think Greg's answer was a good answer from like an academic standpoint. Like you have an academic program, a then you also have like the experience of the students. So like our number one thing before we get to academic student safety, and the research says the places that are wider, places that are lighter, places where kids can spread out more are safe. So the building as it currently is isn't very safe. If you just take, for example, the cafeteria, it's overcrowded, it's dark, you don't have good lines of vision. You have kids that have to walk through the cafeteria to get to one class to another class while there's other kids in there. So it's not, by standards, by modern standards, it's just not very safe. So you have a safety program, then you have your, which is like your environment, and then you have like your academic program, which is the kids' experience as they move through the day.
I guess I would just urge us to think of, I mean, we throw the word safety out there and everybody's like, oh yeah, we have to do everything we have to do to make sure everything's safe, but we also have a school that kids have been going to for the last 50 years, that it wasn't unsafe 20 years ago, and it's unsafe now. So I think we need to kind of ride the fence on, yes, if we build a new school, we would have this size hallways, and we would with this type of light, and we would have everything we would want. Does it make sense to spend, I'm just throwing out, does it make sense to spend extra $30 million to get exactly what we want when we could have 80% of that for $20 million? They're again making those numbers up.
But you don't want to, I agree with you, you don't want to over-design, but you want to, like when it comes to safety, you want to be safe. I don't buy your argument that we should look at things that 50 to 20 years ago. But Lord, if we did that, we would be nowhere with anything. So
but at what point?
I think we have to look at today's research with the issues that come up in school nowadays that we see on the news a lot. And there's lots of research. And we're doing at the elementary school, for example, with the doorways. The way the doors were designed at the elementary school, they're just not safe. We didn't know that when we built the building, but now we know there's a certain way that you have to design the doors so that if there is ever a major problem, you've got a much better chance. So there's things like that, like when you're renovating the building, you want to take care of, and obviously we wouldn't cut things like that out. So I think I agree with part of your point, but I think you have to look at like, okay, what do we currently know? And we have to be at least at that minimum level. You have opportunity. You want to take the opportunity now, particularly when it comes to safety. And also with programming.
If we can afford it, I would agree with you. It's just,
Yeah.
Just be curious at what point in time in the history did that hallway that's unsafe now turn from being a safe hallway to an unsafe hallway? I don't know.
Yeah, well, the more you know, the more you know. I think that's the point. But I don't think we can cook corners on anything to do with safety, school safety. The programming design is based on the feedback that we got from students and from teachers and from administration about what do we want the middle school to look like. We also engaged the Middle Level Educators Association. Have a lot of publications about what middle level schooling should be from today. We looked at those types of programs as we incorporated that. So I think that's the answer to the academic programming piece. I don't think there's anything extra there.
The other thing I remember going through was the teaming structure as far as delivery of instruction in a certain particular model, and that can be impacted, but that does impact how you design your school.
Right. So that part of that design is the extra spaces for each grade level for collaboration, which are built in as a double space area. So it makes like 7 extra classrooms basically, one a designated classroom, and then 6 extra spaces that move into 6 more. So that's based around the teaming model.
How long have we been teaming in the middle school currently as a structure?
I can't answer that question. Troy can.
Long
I
time.
I
came as a teacher in 2006, and that's the middle school model.
Middle school model is teaming.
If it says middle school on the school and it's not teaming, it's not the middle school.
Right, it's junior high. So if you run your middle school like a high school, you have a junior high. If things are middle school, then you're supposed to be teaming.
I don't disagree with the concept. I'm there again, don't shoot me for saying this, like we've been doing this since 2006 with the building as it's currently structured.
Yeah.
When we look to
No, that was
what
a
we
key.
can afford and can't
No,
afford.
you're right. No, absolutely right. That was a key question.
Right.
Going back to the steering committee, that was a key question. Do we want to look more at a junior high level, or do we want to look more at teaming? So
I'm not saying change the teaming, I'm just saying like, a lot of the cost is changing the whole configuration of the school to better suit for teaming, which I agree that concept would be better, but if we're looking at cost, I think everything should have a price. Is it $10 million better? Or do we keep it the way it's designed?
Just from a numbers perspective, being a previous middle school principal, if you have 300 students at a grade level, right, and you have 150 on purple and 150 on white, those 150 kids need 5 classrooms, 30 per, right, 30 per, or they need 6 classrooms if you want to do 25 per, right? Whether you put all 300 kids in those 12 classrooms and don't separate them by teams, or whether 6 are on purple, 6 are on white, you still need 12 classrooms. Like, you see, so I don't know that the teaming model impacts the structure as much as it does the educational philosophy, the teachers collaborating, getting to know the kids, and all those sort of things. Now, I am hearing maybe there were some collab spaces added because of the teaming, that part, but as for pure classroom space,
The layout doesn't change.
like, you need this many classrooms for this many kids. It's how those teams work together and those teachers take care of those kids and get to know them on the inner. That's the power of the team.
Yeah, and I mean, and Paul, like I'm a tax. Is it okay if I say okay? So I'm a taxpayer, so like I don't like my tax bill as much as anybody else does, right? But I also understand the incredible work that's done on a daily basis inside the middle school, and just because teaming has been done in the middle school doesn't mean it's being done as well as it possibly could be, right? And I can survive in the woods alone for a week. Just because I can do that doesn't mean that's what I want to do, and that having a house and other things wouldn't be better for me, And so, yes, the roof has been fixed, right? And it's still an old building, and so we have been surviving in it. And middle school, adolescence, is a time that many people think you just have to survive anyhow. It is a time where people can thrive, right? And we've worked through this past year like a visioning process for who we want to be. What do we want Northern Middle School to be? And one of the things that came out through our staff, through our families, through our kids, is like the idea of thriving adolescents, right? Like we want a community of thriving adolescents who contribute to and care about the community, the school community. And it's really hard to care about your school community when, the bricks, it's white brick and it's like, I know that it's no longer, the roof is no longer leaking, but like the damage done to the pride in being there, it's still there. And, I think like when you see something and it's left in good condition, you want to keep it in good condition, right? When something's not in good condition, you're less likely to take the time to care about it. And I want our kids and our staff to be citizens of our school, like not tourists. When you're a tourist, you go to throw something away and the trash doesn't go in the trash can and fall. Who cares? I'm here for a week and I'm gone. I don't care, right? I want our people to be citizens of our school, to really care about those things. And providing people an environment to thrive in, I think allows that to happen more naturally, but again, I understand there's a cost to everything. There's also there's costs that aren't monetary to everything too. I think we have to keep those in mind.
First of all, I don't know if I've ever told you this, but I'll tell you publicly, I think you're a phenomenal principal. And I think you've been in this role a short time, and I'm very excited to see, I would think, as we track staff turnover numbers, you will do nothing but continue to drive those numbers down. And I believe that you're right to an extent. I do believe a building plays a role in the morale of the students and the staff. But I also believe if you're going to put a percentage on it, I would throw, maybe it's 10% the building and the other 90% you and the staff and everything that goes into that machine running over there. And I've said this many times, like I think for some reason we think that this building is going to be a magical thing that we're going to put everybody in this brand new building or this brand new renovation, and they're all going to hold hands and sing Kumbaya when they come to school. And I'm sad and frustrated that this renovation has taken so much time and effort away from talking more about staff and what we can do to make all of our schools an awesome, happier environment that people are just lining up to get in. And I would urge us not to lose sight of that, because I feel you can motivate people in a prison, you know. So I just leave it at that. I think let's just continue to. I think we need to continue to try to focus more on staff and keep doing what you're doing. And I just don't want us to have delusions that a brand new expensive renovation is just going to, you know, have everybody just love what they're doing, because it's not, in my opinion.
So if it's okay with the board to keep things moving, is everybody okay with the direction that we've given administration? Like, I mean, by the committee meeting, I can't imagine by regular board meeting, but certainly by committee meeting next month, we should know if there's any significant savings that the design team can give us.
I need clarity here. I know we're focusing on one thing, but I feel like where John started, we've gone down a bit of a different path. My understanding with where John was at was more taking the existing design and seeing if there are certain things within that design to lower the cost. Where I think Greg and where we ended up was more of a, honestly, redesign. We won't have answers on a redesign in 30 days. That's not going to happen. So I'm a bit confused on if we were looking at trying to get the $69 million lower somehow, less glass, that's the question for the design team. I have no idea. That's why we hired them. That's one thing, and we can do that in 30 days. If we're looking at a redesign, that's months of work.
I think Mr. Becker already established that if they can't come back with numbers that are reasonable or that we consider reasonable, then that makes the decision easier, to go to another design team.
But if they do come back with reasonable numbers, would you ever vote for it? Like, that's where I'm at. Like, I don't want to waste any more time.
What the numbers are.
So if they were at the number that you want, you would vote for it. That's where I'm at. Like, I feel like we're wasting all of this time and talking about this stuff in circles.
But unless, until we hear the numbers, how can we make a decision?
Because I think some people already have their own decision made. And I don't want to keep sitting here and talking about it if we're not going to end up, if the numbers don't come to where we need it to be and move forward. I just think we need to make a decision.
I would agree. If they come back and say we can save $1 million, then I think the board's going to have to make a decision based on that. If they come back and say we can save $8 or $10 million by making some changes to the current design, I think it's a completely different conversation.
Yes.
And I think you would have a majority of the board probably say, let's go ahead and put this thing out for bid with the changes.
You're not going to have a design of those changes in 30 days, Greg.
Well, I understand that, but we're going to know whether or not it's achievable. Whether it's achievable with the design team should be able to tell us where the biggest costs are. And if they come back and say, yeah, we can eliminate a couple of things or change things. I mean, David has already alluded to some things he said that they could change with savings. So I would just like to hear that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, Mr. Young, I think you kind of answered the question as you posed it. Was it's not possible to consider a complete redesign by next month or the month after. It's starting with, all right, hey, Mr. Lackey mentioned $8 million. Well, if you consider 10% of 70 million is 7, and 10% of 25, which would be the SLC, that's round about 9.5. There's something there that's trending to, also, meeting the need of that $10 million reduction. But I think it starts with that commentary of, hey, tracking the numbers, where are the dollars in here with as it exists now, what's the potential? And then coming back with that, and, if it's $1 million, then we know, okay, there's a decision to be made because you're still sitting at the point you were at before. And still have to consider, the percentage of existing versus new type of questions. And just also from the perspective of, the industry, it's not just a Schrader thing. They're going to have to go to their sub-consultants, MEP, fire protection, and, hey, what does this look like? What opportunities do we have?
Okay, any more questions on that? Okay, then there is one discussion item, and that is discuss the allowance adjustments for the Northern Elementary School project.